Today, I wanted to talk about a really great question that's come up among our little Course in Miracles study group. And the question is, how do I know when I'm helping versus when I'm, quote, interfering, unquote? Isn't that a really great point that we can use to inquire? How do I know the difference? And the Course instructs us that, we want to remember that I am here only to be truly helpful. And I do not need to know what to say or to do because the one that lives in me will be doing all the saying and all the doing. But how do we know when the right voice is speaking through us or when it's our ego? So I also want to honor that the question came from a mother, and as mothers or fathers, we have these children in our lives, and when they are hurting or in trouble, it feels so incredibly challenging to watch them suffer. And it's very challenging for me sometimes when I hear people who've never had children talk about, these things, because there's just something different. And I'm not saying that it's true, but I'm saying it's a different kind of a classroom. And that's really important as just a little segue, that what I'm going to share with you is from my own experience as much as my understanding of the Course and other non-dual traditions. And I also honor that everybody has their own path, and the mind has many unique expressions. Each one of us is unique, and each one of us has a way that the self will awaken within us. And so nobody has the answers for anybody else. And I don't pretend to have the answers for you. And that's even a good place to start as we approach the question of how do I know when I'm helping versus interfering. Can I start with the fact that my children, let's take an example. My children are also unique expressions of the mind, and the self is waking up in them in a unique way, whether it seems to be or not. We know that that's true. And so right there, I'm invited to start from a humble position of I do not know my own best interests, and I do not know anyone else's for sure, including my kids. So as a mother, what I can share from my own experiences, and please don't think this is just a mother experience. This can be transferred to any situation, any relationship, whether it's personal and you're thinking of your father or your mother or your sister or brother, whether you're thinking of a colleague or whether you're thinking of a world, I think these principles can be transferred. And I want to talk on two levels today. I want to talk on sort of the highest truth of my experience, as well as, yes, but what do I do? What's the practical matter of it all? All right. So the first thing, and I'm going to use this example of, I have a suffering child. Let's say they're in depression. Let's say they're in anger, or maybe they're acting out, or whatever it is. Maybe they're sick physically. The first thing I have to do is recognize I am never upset for the reason I think. All right? So if I'm with my son and he is mad or upset or anxious or having depression, and I feel anything but peace, the first thing that I need to remember is this is my classroom. If I forget to remind myself that nobody is causing me to be anxious about my son, then I'm in the hypnotism of the ego. And so the Course tells us that the one right use of judgment is, how do I feel? So in this moment, my son is sitting with me and he's telling me how he hates his life, or he's telling me about some horrible thing that happened to him, or that I said to him 10 years ago, or whatever it is that's happening. And I feel upset or sad or in despair for him. Can I take a step back in that moment and just realize that he's not causing this? Now, what I really want to invite us to not do next is to repress what we're feeling or should ourselves out of our feelings. Please don't do that. I did that for years and it did not help at all. It made it worse. What Jesus is asking us is for authenticity, but to look with him. And if I had one gift to give you, I would just give you full permission to be the way you are in the moment that you're it, without projecting it. Can I just own that in this moment, my authentic feeling is, man, I am sad. And in that same space that I've created, because I'm allowing myself this authentic expression, in this same space, can I not try to change it and fix it and run away from it? And that's what we're doing when we're interfering. What we're doing when we interfere is we are trying to change the world, which in this moment may look like my son, so that I can get rid of this feeling. I want to make this feeling go away by somehow righting a wrong, by somehow fixing something broken, by somehow helping. And it's certainly what we're all trained to do by our conditioning. But have you noticed that it doesn't work? Or have you noticed that that moment may go away, but it's going to come back in some other form? It's going to come back stronger, maybe. It's going to come back in a new relationship, or I'm going to get some other kind of backlash. And so, why is that? This is the tricky and mysterious and wonderful and amazing thing about A Course in Miracles, is that it's very consistent. And at the very beginning it says, nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace of God. And so then the entire universe is now my guru. And you can think of the guru as a pointer to everything in me that keeps me identified in a story. And what do I mean by that? In the story of Laura sitting with her son who is having a problem, Laura has a son who's separate from her, who's going through experiences and remembering incidents and expressing feelings, and her separate experience is one of wanting to take care of him, wanting to make it better, wanting to erase the past, wanting to, you know, have given him the perfect childhood that never happened, and wanting to provide the best pointers right now so that he can have the best, happiest life there is, right? All of that is her story in that moment. And while her story is alive in her, the guru, whether it's the son or the ex-husband or, you know, the client or the husband, the dad, whoever it is, the universe is the guru showing her the one, the story, serving it up for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And sometimes the story is happy, and a lot of times it's sad, or it leads us to feel anger or frustration or insecurity and all that other stuff, right? But it's still a story. So I've, going back to sitting with my son, I have first, if I'm a Course in Miracles student who is ready to really practice, I remember my workbook lessons, and I remember I am never upset for the reason I think. And I remember, even though I don't feel it right now, I could choose peace instead of this. But what I don't want you to do is beat yourself up because you're not choosing peace. Okay? Beating yourself up is another level of the story that I'm just really starting to experience in a new way myself, actually. It's a very subtle form of ego that shows up in our lives as the one who studies the Course. And actually, when you start to tune into it, it's not subtle at all. It's the superego. It's the one that has been, you know, shitting and berating you, and also keeping you inauthentic. It's the spiritual ego. It says spiritual people don't have these feelings, they don't do these things, and it judges itself and others all the time. But it's very politically correct. So I want you to notice that you're not in peace. And the Course has told me I could choose peace. Well, who's the I in the equation? Oh, can you even just feel the space in that question? Can the I that is stuck in the story of Laura choose peace? You know, the story has no ending, and it has no answer to the question why. Why did this have to happen? Why didn't I do this differently? And it never will. The story is a setup for continually chasing answers where there is no answer. So when I'm identified in the story, I can't choose peace. That's not the I that can choose peace. And that's when another Course workbook lesson might come into your mind. Ah, I will be still an instant and go home. And if you've been using the workbook lessons as meditations, and there's no right or wrong way for doing that. But as you work with this, and as you are sincere, and maybe other expressions of this come to you that are easier for you to experience, like they did for me. But over time, your sincerity will lead you to what's helpful for you. And over time, you've had more experiences where you were not so completely identified with the story, and you had more space, more sense of peace and calm. And so then you get into these classrooms with relationships, but your mind remembers the truth had been experienced, so you're quicker to remind yourself. And that's why I would really urge every one of us to practice contemplation, practice meditation, practice just stilling our minds, practice letting go. We've talked about turning over our day, and that's a type of a meditation. There's other things we can do as well to still our mind. And the reason is that it's so helpful when we have steeped in that, in the safety of our own bedroom every morning, let's say. And now I go out into the world and I kind of get my stories pummel me, But I bring this spaciousness, this strength with me. So I forget still, and I get caught up in the hypnotism, but I remember faster. So it used to be I was always in drama. I was always upset and anxious. But I can notice that over time, the periods where I'm confused or hypnotized grow shorter. So, I used to forget for 6 months at a time. And then, I'd go to a new age bookstore and I'd, pull out whatever it was in the moment. And something would just like remind me, oh, right, the truth, right, this feels right, this resonates. And then I would study that for a while and practice that for a while. And then I would forget it again. Maybe I'd forget it by the time I got home. But over time, those periods of forgetting got shorter, and the lapses got shorter, and the strength in me got stronger, the truth in me, the light in me, the awareness in me, whatever word you want to use, the Christ in me was more present in my experience for more time. So now again, sitting with my son, he's upset, I'm remembering. I'm never upset for the reason I think. The other thing I can remember is I'm only seeing the past. And I could choose peace, but instead of this, I will go be still and go home. You see how all these workbook lessons begin to work us, right? I hope you've been doing the lessons, and so these are familiar to you. But if you haven't been, that's okay. You just might want to start. I've used the metaphor a lot of times that it's like the Karate Kid, where once he gets into the battle, he has wax on, wax off, paint the fence, right? He's got his moves, and that's kind of how the workbook works us. We get into the scenarios, we still have to go out into the battlefield, but we remember we can go, oh, I can go above the battlefield now. I can watch with new eyes my dynamics, not judging my dynamics. Let myself be authentic. So I'm sitting with my son. We're going to keep doing this. I'm sitting with my son. He's telling me his story. And I've put myself above the battlefield by remembering what I want to remember, these truth pointers from the Course workbook. So now I'm witnessing, right? I'm not reacting, I'm witnessing. That's all we're expected to do. That's like the A+ student. I'm witnessing. When something arises in me, I know nobody is causing it. It's just what's here. And it's some unfoldment of truth that's happening in me. And if I allow it by not reacting and not shaming myself or trying to fix the situation, it will naturally heal itself. I know this is so counterintuitive, right? But what heals? The Course is really clear that the Holy Spirit is the only healer there is. And what is the Holy Spirit? Right? The Course is clear that forgiveness merely looks at devastation and doesn't judge and patiently waits. Isn't that what happens when I step back and I become witness? And I don't have a feeling that I'm trying to get out of a situation, that I'm waiting for a new moment, that I want this person or myself to change. I'm letting things be as they are, which is another workbook lesson. Let all things be exactly as they are. That's a profound lesson. And the ego wants to rush in, and it's okay. Let's not vilify the ego anymore, okay? Because that's making it real. But let's just say there's a movement of fear that says, "What? He's suicidal." You can't just let all things be exactly as they are. Are you insane? You got to do something. So this thought system of the Course is very challenging to the ego thought system. And that's why we're together and why we have resistance. That's what resistance is. It's that movement of challenge, that sense of being challenged that our ego experiences. When we're identified as the ego, we experience being threatened. Let all things be exactly as they are. If I don't know my own best interest, can I know his? If I'm responsible for my peace, can I be peace no matter what seems to be happening in his appearance? Can I choose something other than the story that is really present right now? Like, it is making so much noise. This story is clamoring for my belief. Can I choose something else, which is the holy instant, where I see through the story into the truth? I see the Christ in front of me. I see everything in front of me. This is the guru in front of me, the Christ, crying out for my belief so loudly. And now I finally have the ears to hear that Jesus is sitting right here, whispering, choose again. Remember who you are. Remember who I am. Remember that nothing real can be threatened. Nothing unreal exists. Herein lies the peace in you because you are God. Wow. Now, what I've noticed in practical terms, I can't do this perfectly so much. I'm better than I used to be. What I've also noticed is that none of that has mattered at all. I've never caused anybody suffering. I've never caused anything to happen. But this continual unfoldment of truth that is my true nature has, over seeming time, become more present in my experience. And as this I that I am, that this I that is who we all are, as I awaken to myself, it invites more truth in my field. And where is the separation between where I start and stop and my son starts and stops? Can you find that separation? Or is that just a concept? Is that a story? The ego story is a story of separation, and it says that there are discrete bodies and psychological selves, and yet can quantum physics support that? Or is everything energy, vibration, movement? And is waking up, becoming enlightened, which I think are two separate things. I think we have an awakening to who we are, and that can be many different deepening experiences where over and over and over we're shown we're not discrete human beings, and we wake up and realize who we are as the one, and then we enlighten because everything that's seemingly else has to be met, right? So my son is helping me awaken out of the story. And then when I am awake, then he's helping me enlighten. That's how I've become, that's how I've come to see it. So now, as the one, the one mind, where there is no true separation, there's just thoughts and vibrations and feelings that come through this experience that seems to be sitting in this chair, talking in a microphone. But you're all here with me, and I'm with you. And when I go to sleep at night, this seeming reality disappears completely. But you're with me because you're in the mind. Where else could you be? And my son is always with me. Where else could he be? Right now, my son, who is the self, is appearing in a certain body with a certain set of preferences and memories and all of that. But that's all changing, and that comes and goes. So he's this setup with the mother and the son setup is the classroom for this self to wake up and then to enlighten. So back to the question. How do I know when I'm helping versus when I'm interfering? Well, we really don't ever help as a story. The Course isn't really speaking to us as mothers and sons. That's why there's nothing in this book about what to do in the world. It's something that used to drive me crazy when I was a young 20-something. It doesn't say anything about what to do in the world because that would be reinforcing that there is one. So it avoids the issue, but still speaks to the mind that thinks it is in the world. Through all those workbook lessons. So it may be that in that moment, I just let everything be exactly as it is. I sit with whatever is arising in myself. And I allow myself to fully feel it without the story. I have become a firm believer, which is always a red flag, maybe, just because beliefs, but just from experience, let's say, and I'll caveat it with, hey, I might change tomorrow, but what works for me now is to honor my body as a dashboard and a vault of repressed energy, repressed grief, repressed fear. It's all fear at some level. And so, can I use this situation gratefully as another opportunity to let this fear energy that's really still the self be transformed in my presence? And it seems to be in this body, but it's really, there is no body. It's the self coming home. If I try to fix it or repress it by saying it shouldn't be here, that's like how we were always treated as children when we had an authentic feeling. And so we are now allowing this divine mother to be born in us, that she welcomes all the children in us and listens and doesn't try to fix and says, you're okay the way you are. And then because there is a a love that is unconditional, this fear can unfold on its own. So I'm always staying in my own business. This is what I mean when I say that. I stay in my own business. And what I can tell you is that the seeming others that are in our experience, our sons and relatives and family and colleagues, all of that, they are invited to deeper healing by the light in me that naturally shines as I will be in my own healing. That's what's helping. That's the Holy Spirit. On a practical level, if my son's house is burning down or he's on fire, it's okay to dump a bucket of water, you know. It's okay to go get the hose. Actually, you'll just feel yourself being moved to take whatever step is helpful. But if you can get this distinction, when you're being moved by the Holy Spirit, there isn't a lot of story included. And you're not attached to the outcome. Of course, it makes you happy to see somebody who feels better or gets more, steps out of suffering. But in a deeper part of your mind, you realize that you didn't do anything. They just opened up to a deeper truth. And symbols like a bucket of water that's what was most helpful for them in that moment. Like, the symbol of Jesus or the symbol of an angel, the symbol of a bucket of water to a burning house. Those are just symbols of truth. That's why I don't discount any level of experience, whether we're looking at very practical matters or we're talking about shamanism or we're talking about angels or we're talking about ascended masters, or I don't feel a need to push away anything, because it's all the same. It's symbology. It's levels of mind. And you stop needing to understand everything. I was saying the other day to somebody that I know I'm in my right mind when I'm just water. And more in the last 10 years, that experience teaches me. And so what do I mean by I'm just water? It means that water just flows where there's an opening. It's like where there's a yes, water flows. When there's a no, water doesn't. And it's okay. And you can feel the difference in your life when you're getting green lights, like we've talked about, versus when you're up against those roadblocks. Well, water doesn't bang on the wall, try to try to get in or get through something. And yet water has formed the Grand Canyon, right? It's a it's power. It's not power over, though. It's also it's like being this this light that just flows wherever there is a desire for more truth. And what you'll find in your life is that people will either say no thank you, maybe not even thank you. They'll just say no, I'm not ready, and they'll drop away from your life, and that's okay. We have to really appreciate and respect and allow for the fact that everybody is on their own journey. And then there will be new people coming in that are drawn to your light. And it's not even your light, it's just the light. And they are helping to deepen you, and you are helping to deepen them. There really isn't a teacher who is in a body and a student who's in a body. There is one waking up in this dream and then enlightening itself about all of its dark fear parts, just letting them all come home to be loved awake. Interfering, if we go back to that question again, interfering comes from the story of me. And each of us have a lot of experience being me's, so each of you have your own red flags that can be really helpful for you. So I want you to tune into your own experience, because you have a lot of it now, and getting very quiet and honest within yourself. What are the red flags for you that make you remember, that you can use going forward to see, oh, I'm in a story? And maybe it's that I wake up and I feel this incredible need to fix something, or I used to, find myself for no reason worrying about my boys. Like no reason, nothing had happened, and I'd find myself worried about them. But what I began to see is, oh, that's a really helpful light on the dashboard of my being, right? That's why I said our bodies, because I could feel it in my body. So that is a red flag warning me in a good way, awakening me to, I'm in a story. So can I be with myself? Can I not make it about them? I don't need to keep following these thought forms out down these rabbit holes, because then I just live it out again and I just perpetuate suffering, and I'm not being an agent of peace at all, not for them or for myself. I'm just keeping this thing going. If you look in our world right now, this mind that wants to keep itself going is just, it's like all I see is a frantic effort through extreme polarization and extreme judgment and extreme fear and hate to keep something that is nothing going. So the way forward is through our own experience of this fear and this pain with no story. And then let ourselves be light, let ourselves be that, beautiful, powerful note that gets played in the acoustic room at the guitar shop that begins to set off reverberations in all the other instruments that are in the room, because we're all the same. And when we hear that sound of truth, we all can, oh, yes, that's who I am. It's not conscious, it's underneath. That's what's healing, that's what's helpful. The motions and the sense of the doing stuff comes naturally. And it may seem to have some immediate effect, and then often it does not. But we just have to let go of appearances, don't we? Let me tell you what an unhealed healer does. Let's say I invite you to my office and you have a problem and I give you Reiki, and then I sit there and I expect for you to look healed because I need validation. I need to know I did the right thing. Me, Laura did something. And if you don't heal, then you must just not be open to the truth. You're in your denial. You're in your ego, blah, blah, blah. I think every one of us have had some kind of an experience like that, and it's awful. And we might find ourselves sort of playing along with it too. We might kind of try to act like we've had a healing just so we make them happy. Well, our kids are no different. So we want to put an end to the people pleasing that we expect people to do with us and that we have been doing with everyone else, and just stay in our own truth. Meaning, I stay as my own best student. I stay remembering who I am and deepening in that and feeling the truth of what's happening in my experience in this moment, and allowing that for everyone. Our fear that this is not enough is great. So it takes huge amounts of gentleness and following these little stepping stones, little prompts in our life, little opportunities that are given us. And every time we follow, and every time we have a little willingness to let go of what we think we know, our faith builds. But I want to honor that there's a lot of resistance to this. There's a lot of fear that this is not enough. There's a lot of terror, really. So we all need each other's hands to kind of grab onto occasionally or frequently as we're moving through this. To remember it is enough, all is well. I can tell you from my experience, and that is really going to be your best teacher as well. But while you don't have it or you're in the process of gaining it, I can tell you from my experience, everything in my life that seemed to be devastating just 12 years ago has healed. I'm not saying it's perfect. I'm not saying I still don't get triggered. I'm not saying there aren't problems in the world that I'm in. My experience is very different than it used to be, though. You have every reason to take courage and be happy that you're on this path. This is really the path out of suffering. It really, truly is. And in your heart, you want to be a helper. This is the path to that as well. Because, of course, the self wants to be loving itself in all its forms. And, of course, the self doesn't want any part of it to be asleep in suffering. So thank you for our kids and our families and our world for being so uncompromising in their teaching and forcing us to suffer or awaken. And I hope this has been a helpful discussion about the difference between helping and interfering. And I feel like it probably could have been more succinct, but this is what came out today. And we can continue to look at it together if you have more questions that come up. And I hope you have a lovely rest of your day.